He's written about his life in his new book, The Most Famous Musician You've Never Heard of. Please welcome Andy Cahan.
I was with Jimmy Carl Black in a band called Geronimo Black in 1968. He was the Indian of the group with Frank Zappa and the Mothers. And so my friend Scooby from the Musicians Union told Jimmy that I was a really good keyboard player. And so he came over to my house with Roy Estrada, the bass player, and I had my harpsichord and I started playing my songs. They said, oh, cool, cool. So we started a band, and then Frank Zappa asked Jimmy to be in the movie 200 Motels. And so I went to the rehearsal, and there was Flo and Eddie at the rehearsal. And that was the first time I met him. And we went out back to smoke a J and all that stuff. And so later on at Cherokee Studios in Box Canyon, off of Topanga Canyon, it was a 4-track studio. It was the same studio that Ricky Don't Lose That Number and all that. So I was hired to do some organ overdubs for Richard Nader's Let the Good Times Roll movie. And so Flo and Eddie were there doing a soundtrack for a movie called Cheap. It was also called Dirty Duck, and it was an X-rated cartoon. And so we're in the studio and stuff, and Bruce Robb was the engineer. There was a group called the Robs that used to be the house band on Where the Action Is. Anyway, so they asked Bruce to go on the road with them as a keyboard guy, and he says, I can't because I'm engineering in the studio. So they asked me. They said, would you mind? Would it be okay? And ever since that day in 1973, I was with the Turtles for 40 years. And we toured Europe as a 2.5-man show. It was like a vaudeville act. It was like they had a movie screen with slideshows from the early days when they were in a group called the Crossfires, a surf band, and then the Turtles and all that stuff. And then we would do parodies and funny skits, and I was like a half a man. I played a Fender left-hand bass keyboard and a Yamaha piano, and they had a thing called the Rhythm King drum machine, and just had buttons on it like Paso Doble, like boom, chick boom, 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 chick boom, boom, and all these different rhythms. And the speed of the thing. So I had all my notes, you know, how fast the song was and the rhythm that I should use. And we did this whole show. And one of the highlights was Pink, Flo and Eddie's The Fence instead of Pink Floyd's The Wall. So what they did was they had a rattan fence. And we introduced it as Pink, Flo and Eddie's The Fence. And they bring out the fence, and, you know, you get splinters on this stupid thing. So they gave me a puppet, an aardvark. So I wore this aardvark on my hand to hold the fence. And they played We Don't Need No Education, but they sped it up. So it's, we don't need no education, you know, real fast. And so we were bouncing and throwing airplanes and hippos and balloons and stuff up, and it was so hilarious. You can actually Google it, the 2.5-man show, and the videos online. But working with Flo and Eddie was, I got to meet every single guy that I grew up listening to working with Flo and Eddie. You know, like Tommy Rowe and Gary Puckett and Spanky and Our Gang and, you know, all these great groups that I grew up listening to, I got to meet. So it was very, very cool. And I'll tell you a really good story. We did a tour in Australia, and our first stop was Toowoomba, which is this out in the middle of nowhere place. And it was our very first show. We got off the airplane. We took a 3-hour drive out into the middle of nowhere, and there were 9 people, you know, setting up the stage, the sound crew and the lights and all that. And so we did our sound check, and we went back to the hotel and had dinner, and then came back to the gig, and nobody showed up. We played the entire concert to the 9 people that were there, and we were scared shitless. We were in Australia, and we had like another 12, 14 dates to play all around, and we're saying to ourselves, what? There's nobody here. What's going on? But luckily, the rest of the tour was all sold out. And our next stop was Melbourne. And we got to play with Lou Reed. He opened the show for us. He was the opening act. And I got to hang out with Lou Reed.